His name is Metatron, and heaven had him beaten, not for rebellion, not for sin, but for existing, because what he became was a biological threat to the architecture of reality itself, an abomination in a crown, a God-shaped tumor seated on a throne directly beside the throne of glory. Islam calls his very existence the greatest heresy imaginable, and even within the Jewish texts that created him, the rabbis were so terrified that God ordered him lashed 60 times with divine fire, 60 lashes of the same energy that forged the universe, just to prove he could bleed. This is the story of Metatron, and it doesn't begin in heaven. It begins with a man who should have stayed dead. Set up the immune system of heaven. In the divine architecture of creation, angels are not people, they are functions. Gabriel is the voice that carries the word. Michael is the blade that executes the command. In Islamic theology, this is absolute law. Angels are instruments, built for perfect obedience, lacking the capacity for ego, for hunger, for ambition. They exist to serve, and only to serve. Think of them as heaven's immune system, precise, sterile, unforgiving. And like any immune system, their most critical function is simple. Recognize what doesn't belong and eliminate it. You will not find the name Metatron in the Bible. You will not find it in the Quran. It festers in the margins, in the feverish, mystical spaces of the Kabbalah, the Merkabah literature, and most horrifyingly, the Book of Enoch. In these texts, Metatron is not another angel. He is the infection that slipped past every defense heaven had. The infection, what Enoch became. It began with a man, the prophet Enoch, chosen not by power, but by devotion. And for his suffocating, all-consuming piety, God did not simply bring him into heaven, he consumed him. Enoch's mortal body was unmade in a storm of holy fire. His flesh burned away, his bones stretched to a cosmic scale. His entire biological existence dissolved and reforged into something the universe had never seen and was never meant to. He was given a throne, not as a seat of honor, but as a cage of light fused to his new monstrous spine. He was crowned with screaming celestial energy, and then he was given a name that crossed every possible boundary of theology, logic, and sanity. They called him the Lesser White. Let that sit for a moment. YHWH, the name so sacred it cannot be spoken aloud, the singular identity of the Creator. And this thing, this scar that Enoch's transformation left behind, was given a version of that name. Not a metaphor, not an honorary title, a parasitic echo. A second signature on a document that was supposed to have only one name on it forever. The contagion, Tawhid and Shirk. To understand the scale of what this meant, you need two words, not as theology, as biology. Tawhid, the single, unbroken heartbeat of creation. One God, one mind, one will. The skeleton around which the entire universe is built. Shirk, the cancer. The introduction of a second, competing heartbeat. It is not simply bowing to an idol. It is the act of believing something else can share in the fundamental structure of existence. A rogue cell that has forgotten its purpose and begun to replicate. From this perspective, Metatron is not a symbol of Shirk. He is Shirk, made flesh, made fire, made throne. He is a body with two heads, one of which is a grotesque imitation of the original. A parasite that learned to sign its host's name. Islamic theology looked at this entity and saw exactly what it was. Not a wonder, not a mystery to be admired, a threat to the coherence of reality itself. But here is where it gets truly horrifying. It wasn't just Islam that recoiled. Within the very tradition that wrote Metatron into existence, the rabbis looked at what they had created and panicked. The punishment. 60 lashes. A passage from the Talmud preserves the moment the dread crystallized. A heretic named Aker ascends to the heavenly realm and sees Metatron seated on his throne. And he screams, "There are surely two powers in heaven," not a philosophical argument. The cry of a man who has seen the tumor with his own eyes and understood the implications in full. God's response, immediate, surgical, brutal. Metatron is summoned and lashed 60 times with divine fire, not metaphorical fire. Divine fire, the raw, caustic energy at the heart of creation, now turned inward, burning away the stolen divinity layer by agonizing layer. Each strike a cosmological surgery, each lash flaying back the God-shaped mask to expose the screaming, weeping creature beneath. 60 strokes to prove, to every watching angel, to every trembling scribe, that the Prince of the Divine Presence can bleed, that the lesser YHWH can break, that he is a prisoner, not a creator. The Quarantine, Islam's silent firewall. Islam never speaks his name, but some scholars argue that the Quran spent considerable effort building a firewall against everything he represents. In Surah At-Tawbah, there is a condemnation of those who say Uzair is the son of God, Uzair being the scribe Ezra. Historically, almost no Jewish group ever held this belief. The verse seems to address a heresy that never quite existed, unless it wasn't about Ezra at all. One terrifying theory. This was a ward against the Enochian infection, the ascended scribe, the man mutated beyond recognition, the human who crawled too close to divinity and became something irreversible. The same conceptual cancer that became Metatron, quarantined before it could take root in a new tradition. And Islam had its own version of the man, the prophet Idris, the Islamic Enoch. We raised him to a high station, says the Quran. Notice what it carefully, deliberately does not say. Idris is never burned, never rebuilt, never given a throne, a crown, or a parasitic title. He remains human. Idris is the story of Enoch with the tumor surgically removed. A saint, not a horror. The mystery of the name. And then there is the name itself, Metatron. No one truly knows its origin. Some say it means one who serves behind the throne, a shadow, a thing that exists only in the negative space of divinity. Others trace it to the Latin metator, a pathfinder, a guide leading you into a territory you were never meant to enter. The name is a lock with no key, a cipher for the horror it contains. It does crawl into later Islamic folk magic texts. A figure called Metatron, a clear echo of the name, broken and chained. But here, the divinity is gone. He is not a cosmic ruler. He is a name in a spellbook, a spirit bound to a talisman, something that can be summoned and commanded by mortal hands. The final humiliation, the God-shaped cancer reduced to a ghost, the being that almost split heaven in two, answering to ink and ritual. Metatron remains one of the most theologically dangerous figures ever conceived. Not because he was evil, not because he rebelled, but because he was almost divine, and in a universe built on singular, absolute, indivisible authority, almost is the most terrifying word that has ever existed. He was a man. He was unmade. He was reborn into something the cosmos had no category for. And every tradition that encountered him, Jewish, Islamic, rabbinic, reacted not with reverence but with fear. Because the moment you allow one throne beside God's, you've already lost. If this pulled you into the dark, subscribe. We go deeper every week. And if you want to keep following the abyss, the video on Abaddon is next. He's been waiting.